What if the kindness you show is the reason no one respects you? What if your need to be liked is the very leash they use to pull you around? You think you're being noble, staying quiet, saying yes, being polite. But what if that's not nobility? What if it's fear dressed in virtue? You see, the world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards power. And the moment your worth depends on approval, you've already lost control. This isn't about becoming cruel, it's about becoming untouchable. And no one understood that better than Machiavelli, because beneath the coldness of his strategies lies a forgotten truth, that you must stop trying to be loved if you ever want to be free. You don't even notice it anymore. The way your voice softens to avoid confrontation, the way you phrase your thoughts so they don't sound too direct, the way you rehearse messages in your head, editing out anything that might upset them. This isn't you being considerate. This is you being conditioned. Somewhere along the way, maybe in childhood, maybe in school, maybe during heartbreak, you learned a dangerous rule. If they're upset, it's your fault. If they leave, it's because you weren't enough. If they stay, it's because you pleased them well. And so your identity twisted around a survival instinct. Don't make waves, be nice, say the right thing, smile, even when it hurts. But here's what Machiavelli knew, something modern self-help books don't dare say. A prince who always tries to be good will come to ruin among the great number who are not good. In other words, the world doesn't play fair. And the more you live to be liked, the easier you are to manipulate. Because people don't see your kindness as strength, they see it as compliance. They learn that your love is unconditional, not because it's pure, but because it's needy. And neediness always invites power plays. This is the invisible prison. You walk through life hoping to be accepted, and in doing so, you hand the keys of your self-worth to others. You'll shrink yourself to keep peace. You'll tolerate disrespect to avoid being alone. You'll become a mirror for everyone else's comfort, and forget there was ever a you behind the glass. But Machiavelli wasn't cold just to be cold. He was honest about something most people lie to themselves about. That power dynamics shape every relationship, even the ones that feel loving, especially those. Because when you need someone's affection more than your own self-respect, you've given them permission to define you. And what makes it worse, you won't even realize it. You'll call it compromise. You'll call it maturity. You'll call it being the bigger person. But underneath, there's fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being the villain. Fear of the silence that follows after you say what you really think. So you keep adjusting, bending, apologizing, performing. But the more you perform, the less real you become. And eventually, you forget what your real face even looks like. All you remember is the mask that made everyone clap. That's the tragedy of the pleaser. You become invisible, even to yourself. And here's the most brutal truth. People love pleasers until they get bored. Because there's no tension, no challenge, no edge. You become predictable, and predictability is never respected. Machiavelli knew this. He saw how easily people are drawn to what they can't control. And he warned, it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But modern minds misread this as cruelty. They imagined tyrants, narcissists, sociopaths. But that's not the point. The point is this: love that is given freely, without self-possession, becomes worthless. Because what you give without standards teaches them that you have none. Your kindness, your loyalty, your love, all beautiful things, but only if they come from wholeness, not from desperation. So the real question isn't, why do people disrespect me? It's, what part of me is afraid to stop earning their approval? And until you face that, you'll keep living in a world that uses your goodness against you. You don't break this pattern by becoming mean. You break it by becoming indifferent to their reactions. You say the hard thing and let them be uncomfortable. You hold the boundary and let them leave. You stop managing their emotions and start protecting your own. Because here's what Machiavelli was really saying. Control isn't about dominating others. It's about not needing anything from them in the first place. And once you stop needing, you become someone they can't play anymore. But if you've been playing this role your whole life, how do you kill the need to please without killing your own heart? To truly stop pleasing, you have to betray the version of you that was built to survive. and that betrayal will feel like death. Because the need to please isn't a personality trait, it's a trauma strategy. It was your way of earning safety. It was the mask you put on when your truth wasn't accepted. It was the small voice in your childhood that whispered, "If I can just be what they want, maybe they won't leave." That voice worked. You stayed out of trouble. You earned praise. You became the good one. But Machiavelli would ask you this: at what cost? How much of your identity was sacrificed for acceptance? How many opinions did you swallow? How many fake smiles did you master? How many times did you apologize for existing too loudly? And who did all of this protect? The answer: a younger version of you who thought survival meant submission. And it did, back then. But now, that version is running your adult life. You're not just avoiding conflict. You're still trying to keep your father from yelling. You're not just being polite. You're still trying to keep your mother from withdrawing. You're not just being nice. You're still terrified that if you say what you really feel, they'll abandon you again. Machiavelli would call this a vulnerability, not because emotion is weak, but because a person ruled by unresolved fear is easily governed. He wrote, "Men should be either treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries, for heavy ones they cannot." Translation: when you play halfway, you get crushed. When you try to both please and protect yourself, you lose both. So what's the solution? You kill the illusion. You confront the truth you've spent your whole life avoiding. The people whose love you were trying to earn were never capable of giving you what you needed. And no amount of perfection, politeness, or patience will fix that. You can only grieve it. This is where most people retreat. Because grieving means admitting it was never about them. It was about the you who needed them to be better. You have to look that version of yourself in the eye, the child who twisted themselves into something lovable, and tell them the truth. You did your job. You kept us alive, but I don't need you anymore. And in doing so, you become dangerous, not because you're mean, but because you're no longer manipulable. You stop explaining yourself, you stop over-apologizing, you stop bending backwards just to be tolerated. Because now, your identity is self-owned. This is what the world fears, not aggression, but indifference. You don't chase, you don't perform, you don't need. You become the one who decides who has access to you. And suddenly, people start treating you differently, not because they've changed, but because you're no longer signaling weakness. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that the perception of strength often was strength, that people treat you how you train them to. And every time you let someone walk over you, you're teaching them you're a doormat. Every time you silence your truth to preserve the peace, you're confirming that your voice isn't worth hearing. Every time you pretend to be okay, you're telling the world you don't need anything. But the second you stop, the game changes. You're no longer reacting to them. You're moving from within. And that is what terrifies manipulators the most. They can't figure you out. They can't guilt you. They can't scare you into compliance. Because you're not here to please anymore. You're here to be whole. But once you reclaim your power, how do you use it without becoming cold, cruel, or heartless? There's a way to lead with strength and still love deeply. And Machiavelli, surprisingly, knew exactly how. Not all kindness is love, and not all coldness is cruelty. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the most courageous act is to withhold access, because when you stop needing to be liked, you gain the ability to see people for who they actually are, not who you wish they were. This is what Machiavelli understood better than most. It is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose. It doesn't mean fear is better than love. It means dependence on being liked makes you a slave. When your identity is rooted in pleasing others, you hand them the power to destroy you with disapproval. They don't even have to raise their voice, just raise an eyebrow. That's not freedom. That's emotional blackmail. True strength, Machiavelli argues, is the ability to govern yourself before anyone else can. So what does that look like? It looks like not explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It looks like walking away from connections that only thrive when you're shrinking. It looks like valuing your peace over being perceived as agreeable. Selective coldness is not about becoming heartless. It's about becoming strategic with your energy. You don't owe warmth to people who use your kindness against you. You don't owe understanding to people who never ask how you feel. You don't owe softness to those who treat it as weakness, because every time you give softness to someone who hasn't earned it, you devalue it. Machiavelli's entire political theory rests on one uncomfortable truth. Human beings are not naturally good. They act in their own interest. They twist morality into tools, and if you walk through life assuming everyone is well-intentioned, you will be manipulated, discarded, and confused about why. He writes, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. As long as you succeed, they are yours entirely. They will offer you their blood, property, life, and children when the need is far distant, but when it approaches, they revolt." That sounds harsh, but it's not a condemnation. It's a map. Machiavelli isn't telling you to hate people. He's telling you to see clearly. Because when you accept human nature as it is, you stop getting shocked when people act selfishly. You stop taking it personally. You stop trying to save or fix or prove your worth to those who don't value it. You start living from a deeper center, one that doesn't need constant validation to survive. And from that place, your kindness becomes a choice, not a compulsion, not a performance, not a survival tactic. You choose love because it's powerful, not because you're scared of being unloved. This is what makes you unstoppable. People don't know how to control someone who can choose both fire and ice, who can walk away with no anger, who can say no without guilt, who can give love freely but never sell their soul for it. You become immune to manipulation because you've burned the bridge that used to connect your self-worth to their approval. And that makes you rare. Because most people, they're still hoping that if they're nice enough, quiet enough, agreeable enough, someone will finally love them enough to prove they're real. But love that has to be earned through self-abandonment is not love. It's a transaction, and the cost is always your soul. But what if the real reason you keep giving too much isn't fear at all? What if it's a hidden hunger for something deeper? And Machiavelli's darkest insight can finally explain why you've never felt enough, even when you give everything. The people pleaser doesn't want to control others. They want to belong. They want to be seen as good, but not just morally good, lovable. And yet, in Machiavelli's world, being good has nothing to do with virtue. It has everything to do with utility. The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. It's a brutal truth. Most people don't care who you really are. They care about what you can give them, how you make them feel, and whether you reinforce their story. So the more you perform, the more you smile, nod, help, soften, serve, the more you disappear. This is the paradox of people-pleasing. You do it to be loved, but the more you do it, the less lovable you feel. Because deep down, something knows. They're not loving you. They're loving your performance. They're loving your silence, your lack of resistance, your predictability, your self-erasure. And if that's what they love, you can never stop performing. You can never say what you actually think. You can never have a bad day. Because if you do, the love will vanish. And that's not love. It's emotional servitude. This is what Machiavelli's work ultimately reveals. Not just about power, but about how we give it away. You don't need to be a prince to betray yourself. You just need to be scared of being alone. You just need to fear disconnection so much that you'd rather be fake and accepted than real and rejected. But here's the twist. Machiavelli never tells you to become cruel or heartless. He doesn't worship domination. He worships clarity. And clarity means this. You can give love from overflow, or you can give it from emptiness. Only one of those leads to freedom. Because if your love is always a strategy to avoid abandonment, then your life becomes a prison made of yeses you didn't mean. Every boundary you fail to set becomes a brick in the wall between you and your real self. And every time you say yes to gain affection, you say no to the version of you that was finally ready to speak. Machiavelli understood, even the most powerful man can be brought to ruin by the inability to say no. Because the man who can't say no is already ruled, not by others, but by his own fear of being unloved. So what's the answer? It's not coldness, it's not cruelty. It's this. You stop performing love and start becoming love. You stop twisting yourself into what others want and start embodying what you actually are. And you let the people who can't handle your fullness leave. That's not loss, that's liberation. Because every time someone walks away from the real you, they make space for something sacred, a life that doesn't require your constant self-betrayal just to feel worthy of breathing. Now I want you to wonder, what if the deepest betrayal isn't how others treat you, but how you've treated yourself in the name of love? In the final chapter, we uncover the most painful illusion of all and how Machiavelli's darkest truth might just set you free. The most dangerous moment in your life isn't when the world turns against you. It's when you finally realize you never needed its approval to begin with. That's when something inside you dies. But it's not your goodness. It's your addiction to being seen as good. And that death, it's freedom. Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." It sounds brutal, cold, heartless. But what if he wasn't talking about ruling kingdoms? What if he was talking about ruling yourself? What if fear in this context doesn't mean cruelty, but respect? To be feared is to be taken seriously. To be respected, to be seen as a presence with weight, not just a shadow that apologizes for existing. You've probably been loved in your life, but were you ever feared? Not in the sense of dominance, but in the sense that someone looked at you and thought, I can't just use this person. I can't manipulate them. I can't lie to them without consequence. That's what Machiavelli is really pointing to. Love alone doesn't protect you. Sometimes love invites your destruction, because when people only see your kindness, but not your backbone, they feel entitled to your silence, and eventually, you start handing it over without a fight. You kill your voice in the name of being nice. You swallow truth because conflict makes people uncomfortable. You nod and smile while your soul slowly burns behind your eyes. But here's the Machiavellian twist. The world doesn't hate you for your darkness. It hates you for reminding it of its own weakness. And when you stop begging for love, when you stop asking for permission to be yourself, when you stop saying yes just to be liked, something terrifying and holy happens. You become untouchable. Because you're no longer trying to win. You're no longer playing their game. You're not waiting for someone to choose you. You've already chosen yourself. And that kind of person is dangerous. Not because they harm others, but because they refuse to be controlled by others. And now, finally, we understand. Machiavelli wasn't trying to make people cruel. He was trying to wake them up, to show them that power isn't about stepping on others, it's about refusing to shrink for them. That love isn't something you earn by erasing yourself. It's something you become when you finally stop needing to be liked. You don't have to dominate the world, but you do have to stop letting it dominate you. And sometimes, the most powerful act is walking away from the need to be loved by people who only loved your performance. If this video stirred something inside you, if you felt called out, seen, or strangely awakened, that's because you already know the truth Machiavelli spoke of. Now it's your turn to stop shrinking, to stop apologizing, to stop performing just to feel worthy of love. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be real. Join our community of seekers reclaiming their truth. Subscribe, comment, and stay with us. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.